Okay guys, a quick video, first ride video on the 390 KTM 390 Enduro R, which I picked up yesterday from SP Motorcycles in Exeter, and I've just done 100 miles over a very wet Exeter, just bucketed it down all the way. Done some lanes on it, obviously breaking it in gently, just to see what it's about. I think there's been talk about this bike's issues, and I think Outback Motorwreck, their video review of it was quite critical of it, which got some people's backs up, but I've got to say it was actually founded in reality. There is an issue with this bike, and actually it's borderline not fit for sale, if I'm honest, straight from the outset. The fueling and the way it stalls and the way it flames out when you shut off the throttle sometimes is pretty bad. It's the worst bike I've ridden for it, and I think the issue is Euro 5 Plus is just making the bikes run that lean that they're just struggling to keep turning over at lower RPM. So I did a lot of stalling. I know obviously you get used to a bike and you stall less and less, but it is a bit of an issue. Hopefully it'll improve with miles. I know obviously the guys at Outback Motorwreck and some of the other American riders have fitted the Fuel X and other devices to trick the bike into running a bit richer, and that does seem to have improved it. So I think there's ways to improve it, but yes, I would say if you're going to go out and test ride one of these bikes or buy one of these bikes, be prepared for it to be stalling, flaming out. I know when I had to do a quick 3-point turn because there was a tractor coming down towards me, every time I tried to just move the bike, I know you get used to it, but it just kept stalling. So that's a big negative about this bike, I've got to say. It's not as bad as that Beta Alp that I just had to get my money back on. That had got a bogginess every time you open the throttle. This, instead, once you're on throttle, it's really good, and once you're moving, it's really good. It's just that initial takeoff. Sometimes it can just, I say, flame out on you. But once you're on power, certainly in off-road mode, because you've got off-road and on-road. Off-road seems to sharpen the throttle and actually make it responsive. Road mode is very dull-witted. It's almost like stirring the engine through treacle to get going. Off-road mode is sharper. It turns off the ABS at the rear and also really reduces the traction control at the rear. I've done some trails on this today, easy ones to begin with. Nice standing position, nice balance. The weight of the bike, 165 kilos. Feels a touch heavier than a CRF or a Voge 300, but it feels stockier, squat. Tauter in the suspension and obviously more power, so it does feel a step up in terms of dynamic ability on the trails on those two bikes, certainly. Conversely though, those two bikes don't suffer that bogging out and that flame out, so it depends which way you want to suffer. When I started to get onto the more technical climbs, again it's a bit like the CF Moto. Once you're on throttle, it's pretty good. It's actually really smooth, tractable power. You can meter it in through first with a little bit of clutch slip. You pick your way up along those or up those rooted, rocky, wet, muddy tracks that we get a lot of in North Devon. So actually it went up little snapper, a tricky lane round here quite nicely. The suspension is a bit firm to start with. I think it's going to soften up a bit, and obviously it's fully adjustable, so you could soften it all out a little bit, so it's a bit more absorbent. I was running stock tyre pressures and stock tyres as well, which is obviously not going to help it over the tree roots where it starts to, it bounced off it rather than rode it. So that's done a little bit to my error not prepping the bike as well as I could for that sort of trail. But you could see the potential in this bike and actually that's what today proved, the potential of the bike, because on the open flowing road, my GoPro had died by that point, the battery had run out, but along the A39 coastal road, which is a lovely sweeping road, it's a perfect KTM 390 adventure road, the old KTM. That bike was in its element then, and so was this to a large degree. Obviously 21-inch front and 18-inch rear. It's not going to have the agility of the old one, but it had still got a real smoothness and eagerness to ride those fast A roads really nicely. So you could push on. You could cover ground quickly on the A roads and on the B roads in the way that the old one did. But then equally, when you got off-road, you've got the ability to now tackle the trails that used to trip the old one up. And you can do it with a lightness that the Himalayan doesn't have and a lightness that the CF Moto doesn't have, and then also a control in the suspension that the CRF doesn't have or the Voge doesn't have. So riding it today, yes, I'm a bit frustrated with the stalling and things like that, and as I say, hopefully there's a remedy to that, but the way it sits in the market and therefore sits on the trails is exactly what I expected it to be. A more focused, better riding, more powerful alternative to a CRF. Is it going to be as reliable? Is it as refined? That's debatable, I think. But for anybody wanting a more spirited alternative to a CRF, I think this is the answer, really. I think those who are saying, why not just get a KTM 690? Well, the softness on the road and the smoothness on the road, like the manageability of the bike and the effortlessness which it covered distance, I think is why it's not a rival to the 690. It's something different. It's not a rival to the Co 450. It's something different. It's something that you could do 300, 400 miles on the road quite comfortably, certainly the adventure version, without any issue, and then turn your hand at trail riding. So it occupies a much more central ground than, say, the 690 KTM, which I've seen, intermediate riders struggle with, because that's all seems to be peak power on those. So when you're going through the deep water crossings of Iceland, actually those 690s were a lot of hard work compared to a CRF or compared to a Vosges. So I think actually a lot of riders who ride in 690s will be better on this because it's softer power, more easy to ride, I think. So it's a very positive first ride. I think chassis-wise, dynamically, it's very engaging. Brakes are good. I like the instruments. I just like the feel of it. It looks great. I think visually it looks fantastic. I love the way it looks. Just that real fly in the ointment at the minute, that fuel in, that stall, that flame out, which, I do feel sorry for these manufacturers, because they're having to work around ever moving goalposts of emissions, and with these single cylinder bikes it is proving difficult to get them to fuel right. Conversely, I've been out on that 625 Vosges today, that DSX, which is equally ride by wire and equally Euro 5 plus compliant, and the throttle and everything about that engine, the way it picked up and pulled, was beautifully smooth and as we expected it to be. It didn't flame out or anything. So I think maybe the issue is with these bigger single cylinder engines versus the twin cylinders, which they do seem to be able to get around the emissions issues much better than on these. How that DRZ 400 is going to fuel, that's going to be a big question. £2,500 price difference between this and the DRZ. If that's absolute buttery smooth and perfectly fueled, then those who have got that extra bit of cash, they might want to think, well, you know what, I'll spend it on a bike that's fueled right, and I could see that argument. So this at the minute at 5,700, it offers great value. It rides really well. I think there's a lot of potential in that engine. It will chug up steep trails. Yes, it's not got a big bottom end punch like some singles, but it's still got enough to get you up steep rocky climbs, the sort of climbs that most people are, the top end of what most people on this bike are going to do. But it just needs fixing at the bottom. It needs fixing at the bottom. Maybe there'll be a remap from KTM. Who knows? But that was a good first ride. Incredibly wet, but I had a good ride. But the sign of having fun in very wet weather is a good sign that was on the right bike for it. So I look forward to getting out on it again, clean it up, service in 600 miles, do a few more 100 miles to get it there. See how we go. Right, cheers.